Welcome to the People Performance Podcast with me, James Cooper.
And myself, Scott Morrison.
Now, slightly different podcast today.
What it is, I've been away for 3 days with 3 different clients, and in one of the conversations had, speaking to 2 very senior leaders in an organisation, and the point of our upcoming retreat was mentioned. We talk about the retreat regularly. It's a big thing in our event calendar. You know, we speak to so many different clients, customers that come to this retreat, and the testimonials as a result of it, and the shared work and the networking that comes off the back of it, it can't be measured into some elements.
So I suppose the question is why senior leaders need leadership retreats to stay ahead.
Well, it's to stay relevant, and it's to stay in the game for starters, but also because of who else is there, if that makes sense. Who else is also joining these retreats? How does this expand their horizons? How do they stay afresh of all the new trends that are happening in their industries, but not even just about in their industries? Because, whether you're private, public, or sports elite, that's kind of irrelevant to some extent, because what you're in there with is like-minded people who are going through the same scenarios and situations as you, and they're coming up with great problem solves. So how do we get on board with that shared best practice? And we're actually putting these people in the same place at the same time to give them an opportunity to do that, as well as many other things. So it's just interesting, because the comment I made when finishing the conversation was, listen, all great leaders will question their use of time, right? The time for urgency, the time to move, the time to stand still, all of these things are relevant. But what people really need to focus on is not how much time they're spending in the pits with the guys, in the war trenches with the guys. It's at what point do I step out? At what point do I survey what's coming on the horizon? How do I keep my finger on the pulse of what's going on around me? And how do I take something from everything else that's going on? So my function here is, can we talk about some of the things you're expected to find within a retreat, such as a T2 retreat, and others, by the way, but such as a T2 retreat? I just wanted to sort of get into how they would benefit, what can they take away, and how that might help them, and why that time is very well spent.
And I think the key point to land on is time.
Yes.
And if it is from a great coaching question that we use on a regular basis, if you're saying yes to this,
what are you saying no to?
What are you saying no to? So what's some of the feedback that, for anybody listening that's even heard of a leadership retreat, they may be sat as a senior leader and they're going, yeah, I've been looking for some development, and my team have done some bits with some organisations. Maybe T2 got their name dropped in there and we've done a bit of work with you. Or this might be the first time you've ever heard of us. But from a leadership retreat perspective, based on senior leaders, because remember, this is capped at senior leaders, by the way.
Yeah.
What feedback have we had from people that have, and we can only speak for hours, but what feedback have we had from people that have attended ours?
Yeah, so when we do the close of play, if you like, at the retreat, we do a lot of recordings, and we give people an opportunity, a bit like a photo booth really at a wedding, but we give people a lot of opportunity to come and speak to us about what they've taken from the day.
Yeah.
Now, I actually posted this last year after the retreat, because I thought it was a fantastic testimonial from somebody about what they'd taken. So bear with me while I read this, guys, and it's only a few lines, but it basically states from one of the attendees at our leadership retreat is, in today's fast-paced business world, senior leaders face immense pressure to drive innovation, make high-stake decisions, and maintain high-performing teams. However, constant demands can lead to burnout, decision fatigue, and strategic blind spots. That's why executive leadership events like this one is not just a luxury, it's a necessity. And as far as I'm aware, that is probably one of the best statements you can have for something we do. And that's where I go when I think about what we can get from something like this.
Yeah, and I think the power of leadership retreats is really to combat most of the things that were mentioned in that statement, in that acknowledgement of, right, I've now got this from this experience. I now know that these things are going on. I know that these are things that I've maybe had to wrestle with in the past. But what are the powers of these leadership retreats then, Scott?
Right. So the way we create ours is we build this around 3 solid days, and they're intense days. They're fast paced. They're designed to keep you on your toes. They're designed to fatigue you to some extent, to keep you intermittent with what we're doing. We want you on your toes throughout, but within that, you're challenged, but you've got high support. You're interacting and networking with new people. Some of these guys have never met each other before. And they're now in a team across 3 days with 3 different ideologies of what we're going to achieve with those 3 days. And they come out the other side with bonds potentially and relationships made that will probably span another decade, and actually share good business views and start to network effectively as a result. So when we talk about how we deliver these are some of the areas I guess we can get value from, some of the things that we would derive value from. So
How many different areas of value are we going to call them then?
I'm not sure how many, because there's a bit of an ad lib one. This is not fully structured, but there's going to be somewhere between 5 and 8. I reckon we'll get to.
Okay.
So let's see as it goes. So the first one for me here is when we look at what we do in day one, and we talk about delving into your values, your purpose, and your future vision of who you are and how you get out of bed in the morning, what motivates you, what pushes you in the direction you're heading in. And it's about understanding how all great leaders have a very good sense of self-awareness.
Yeah.
Okay. They know how they impact the room. They know when they're dialing the temperature up. They know when they need to be supportive. They know when they need to be assertive. They've got a really good balance of who they are and how they impact those around them in their area of responsibility. So leadership retreats like this will provide you a really good opportunity, a deep personal reflection on how you reconnect with your core values. So bringing them back into that psych element that we look at, whether that's, print tools or psychometric tools that we use to get you back onto that base level, to reframe who you are, why you do what you do, and what drives your passion.
And I think just to sort of touch back on that is around reflection.
Yeah.
In the statement that you mentioned earlier, burnout. Well, if you're going and you're in the rat race, let's consider this. And this is fundamentally what we do at T2 anyway. You've been busy. I don't think there's anybody that I've met in 12 months that isn't busy. But understanding that in those first 24 hours of you attending one of our leadership retreats, and probably others out there, but ours specifically, it's all about you, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
Understanding how you show up when your back's against the wall, you're under pressure, based on your value system, your purpose, and that vision for where you want to get to. Now, if I come to a second point of that, then think about your decision making, because some of the decisions that you are not, I don't like using the word forced to make, but are encouraged to make in some of the environments that we create within our pressure room system, that is really as close as you can get to being back in the environment where you've had new projects, you've had failing timelines, you've been successful in timelines, but those decisions that you have made and those problems that you have solved reframe and influence what you do the next time. When was the last time you learned something that surprised you? Well, probably in an environment and in a situation where you've been pushed to make a decision quickly under quite a bit of pressure.
Sure.
When you've learned what someone's true colours are like. Well, you don't necessarily, when everything's going nicey, you don't necessarily see people's true colours because it's easy for them to sort of mask it. But when you're given in a position where stress is increased and control is maybe decreased a little bit, then we start to see how you can then embrace your own, back to point one, yourself, then think about how that impacts the decisions and the problems that you solve.
Absolutely. And we definitely help leaders sharpen their strategic thinking and their problem solving within the environment we create. And if for anyone who's been to one of our retreats, they'll know exactly what we're talking about there. And if I drop a hint, pressure rooms, you'll know exactly where you're going with that. That communication, that management of emotion, your social awareness, and how we communicate throughout. So decision making within that group environment is massive. Yeah, so really, really good point there. And one of the other things as well, when we're talking about leadership and, high level leadership, your ability to get back to baseline in a rapid state is massive for everybody. So when we're talking about a test of strength and utilizing your levels of resilience to deliver the best version of you for not only you and your outputs and what you've strategically planned for the future, but for the team around you to better understand who you are at your baseline is massive. So that resilience to be able to turn up day in, day out, when needed, obviously, for the high levels of time that's in there, or the short, whichever way you are, the resilience skill set and how to get back to your key level of resilience is massive for people. So when we're talking about this, our leadership retreat will really include activities designed to challenge your mental and your emotional strategic thinking and resilience within that. So yes, decision making, but the idea of how do you underpin that with that real steel of who you are, that's key too.
Yeah, and I think when we start to look at that, you can obviously look in the mirror, which obviously we hold up.
Yeah.
But if it is that you start to look to your left and look to your right and see somebody else doing things in a slightly different way, like-minded people that hold not necessarily the same role, but similar roles or similar levels within organisations and services, where you can actually maximise that network opportunity. I think you mentioned it earlier, to say, right, how do I do it? And then how do you do it? How does the person to the left, to the right of you deal with the same situation? What's going on in their internal narrative and what works for them that you've never tried before? Sharing of best practice.
Listen, yeah, you took the words out of my mouth there. Sharing best practice. It's the opportunity to ensure that you're equipped to handle uncertainty in high pressure moments and environments, but come through it on the other side.
Yeah. And if it is that collaboration, I think it's probably the biggest point. And I just want to mention around the sort of structure that we apply. If you've got a room full of 30 to 50 people and then you make teams out of them. So for anybody that's forming a team as a CEO that's actually forming or building their organisation or growing an organisation, it's perfect to see what good looks like. When you put randomers in a room and go, right, by the end of 3 days, we want you to be a high-performing team.
Yeah. And we do that.
Yes,
we do.
So if there's anybody listening now thinking, you know what, I've got this new venture or I'm taking over as this senior leader or CEO or exec, whatever it is, probably a perfect opportunity for somebody to come and join our leadership retreat, just from a forming of teams point of view.
Yeah.
But what else is there, Scott?
So when you're a leader, when you are pressed and you are in those uncertain scenarios, how do you maximize your performance as a high-level leader, manager, influencer? Whichever title you like to give. Not everyone likes to live by a command or a title, but how does this happen? And when we talk about leadership retreats and how they help unlock performance by removing distractions, because you're away from the office. So yes, when we talk about being busy for 3 days and do we have the time to step out of the office, that is a really good time to step outside of the office, if that makes sense, and refocus by removing the distractions and getting back to the strategic thinking, understanding what decision making is about, what are the basis of it, what's the ethos of your decision making, what's your purpose, where you're trying to head to, and what are these high impact techniques, leadership techniques that you can take on from such an event? Because when you think about it, like you said, the people in the room are at the same level as you. We have like-minded leaders in there looking to improve. So they're out there, they're open, and they're sharing thoughts, ideas, opinions. And that's to be challenged, right? That's to be challenged, but handled correctly, of course, but it's to be challenged. And this is what's going to help us drive results. So how do you take that thought and strategic thought to the next stage?
So then think about this. So if it is that when we start to think about what you get from some of these communications with other people in networks, well, and the message that you're then taking back to your organisation or service.
Yeah.
Communication is fundamental to everything that anybody does, because you won't be able to get anything done if you didn't communicate with them.
It's at the heart of every relationship.
Absolutely everything. Because when we start to think about strong relationships and effective communication, well, it is really practical tools and exercise to improve that influence. And for some people, the biggest one is executive presence.
Yeah.
When, especially as people have gone, and it's not just the one, but as people rise through the ranks of an organisation, become a senior executive, or whatever that situation is, even just going from a promotion point of view, changing from one organisation to the other, if your communication is really aligning your team, then you're obviously going to be in a better foot on a more of a positive front foot than for somebody that is really struggling with their communication.
Absolutely. And we all know that the key to buying is clarity of direction. If you've got clarity in what the purpose is and where you're heading, that's where you're gauging your buying. It's when things are clouded or foggy, people start to disengage, become disillusioned, and get lost on the journey to where you're going. So it's bringing that back, isn't it? It's bringing that clarity back, clarity of vision, if you like.
And I think even when it is that you start to hear people on a regular basis of a certain level, you start to see the trends.
Yeah.
You start to maybe look at yourself and think, actually, I've been communicating to my teams in this way, shape and form off the back of this leadership retreat, when I've been able to maybe recharge or sustain or recharge for my own health in some situations, that actually I'm just going to refine the way that I deliver these messages. So from a communication standpoint, I'm taking the time to reflect, have that conversation with myself, and then think about what am I looking at from a communication perspective that could have the biggest impact for me, for my organisation, for the people that I work with.
And can I just say, I love that. And the reason why I love that is we've come into this room, and I've come into this room full of energy and passion. And for those of you who are listening out there, you've probably had high energy comments made, and there might even be a little bit of a lack of structure, what we've discussed, compared to usual podcasts that we deliver. And I think that's because my energy is high, and it's wanting to help people understand where this thing comes out. So that small segment there where you've sat there and talked about how do I realign my communication? How do I represent and give the information effectively? And you've slowed it right down. So I'm going to try and get on your level and come down a little bit, because my energy's high and I feel quite passionate about it. But when having this conversation with these two guys, and it was a really good conversation, and it wasn't so blunt as it is, it isn't. It was very calm in relation to how we responded and had got into the conversation. But the key thing for me is this. When they're saying to me, we don't have time, we're up against it, the daily grind, if you like. We've got people relying on us. We've got results relying on us. We've got customers relying on us, etc., etc. My point to them was, you've got to take a look at how much time you're spending within that element, right? Because that's fast and it's furious. And when we talk about this, I don't think people really get this, but leadership burnout is actually a real thing. I think people just think it's certain elements of the workforce that get it, but leadership burnout, the pressure, the expectation, the worry, the responsibility, the accountability, the decision making, all of that adds to a level of pressure. And if you're in it for a sustained period of time or too long, it can have its effects. So when we talk about what do we try and do at our T2 leadership event, what we're trying to do here is create a well-structured environment where executive retreats like ours combine professional development with personal well-being. Because in that session where we bring you back to your baseline to help you understand what is your clarity and what is your sense of purpose, we allow you to sort of sit in that moment, take that deep breath and think, right, this is why I get out of bed every morning. And this is how I can reset myself and go back into the workplace with a brand new focus on what my track is and how to get back on track towards my target, towards my goal. And as a result of the interaction across the 3 days, as an example, through the different sections we've discussed, you're able to really look at what my communication style is, how am I networking effectively, what best practices have I shared, what new skills have I sharpened to get me back on track, to drive me forward and move me on. And I don't think people really see the benefit of coming out of the trenches at times to get above the parapet and have a look at what's ahead, what's on the horizon. Take away some of the uncertainty and start to actually think, how do I get back on track to my direction? And I think that's just a key point for what we do and how we deliver things like that.
Yeah, and I think I think for some people, it is the most difficult thing to do, is to take that step back. Because you're in these positions for a reason, right?
But that's my point. What you've just said there is to take this step back, because that's exactly how it's viewed.
You've got to take
a step back. But it's not a step back, is it? If you think about it, it's a step up. what you're doing is you're separating yourself from the hustle and bustle of what's happening. If you take that step up, you actually get that strategic viewpoint of looking at the bird's eye view. I'm looking down, if you like, on what's happening. And sometimes we don't see the woods for the trees. So we have to step up, not step back. It's step up and take a look at it that way.
Yeah, okay. So if I was to come back at the energy and start to think of, right, what are the things that people are taking away from this then? So, and we can only speak for hours. What can people expect if they really wanted to join the Ultimate Leadership Retreat? And I'm going to say it, by the way.
Go on.
The T2 Leadership Retreat, 2025.
Okay, well, I'm not one for blowing trumpets, I won't. But what you will get, without doubt, is expertly led workshops. The workshops that we create across the 3 days will help you bond, help you strategize, help you reset, find a balance, but ultimately it will take you to that next level. And that next level is where you go back to the workplace refreshed with a brand new purpose and a good strategic view on how to set that purpose in motion. That's one of the key things you'll get.
You also, again, from us, and it is one of the catalysts that you obviously, or one of the outcomes that you get from the catalyst of being on the leadership retreat, is individually focused development.
Yeah.
And we mentioned earlier about it being about that one individual thing. You've got to look at yourself. We're not going to pull that away. You've got to, it's definitely something that everybody that has attended it has taken at least something about themselves away from our leadership retreat.
And because of the environment, here's a third, if you like, the third, because of the environment we create and the speed that we move at, it's always going to be immersive. Within the learning experiences that you have, you're thrown in the mix, in the blender, if you like, with people you don't know, people you've got next to no acquaintances with and no interpersonal skills with. You don't have that one-to-one connection. But by the end of the 3 days, because of the speed we move, because of the accountability and the reliability you put on the other person to get you through that day, through that 3 days as an output, it's immersive, and the bonds you'll create as a result of that are fantastic.
And then obviously when you do have a little bit of downtime on the evenings, and even we are putting you in situations where they are going to challenge you. So it might be something that you discover. It could be a discovery element, and that could be the real key thing that you take away from it. Or is it that reflection and strategic growth?
Yeah.
So if there is something that just lights your spark, for example, is it something that you've discovered that you didn't know about yourself? Is it a reflection that you've had based on something else you've seen from that network? Or is it actually, strategically, you need to go in, have a conversation with somebody off the back of something that you've learned about yourself going into the organisation or going back into the organisation?
We get so caught up as leaders, managers, influencers in our areas of responsibility with the jobs that we have and the accountability and responsibilities we have for our people and the results that we drive. We get caught up into that phrase of, I just don't have enough hours in a day. I just don't have enough days in the week. I don't have enough weeks in the month, and to some extent I get that, but it's at that point for me, instead of stepping back, as I said earlier on, it's time to step up, because this is where you now need to refresh, recharge, and review what we're doing to move forward. And it starts with you. So where you can challenge yourself, or the organization you're in, or the team that you're in, is always, what can I do to improve? What can I do to take the next step? And potentially looking at one of these leadership retreats, especially one with us at T2, is that next step for you. If you're thinking this scenario, where do I go to next? What's my next learning curve? Outside of everyday coaching, executive coaching, career coaching, whichever you may take, what's my next step? If I'm looking to take that next step in my career, in this organization, challenge it.
Yeah, so challenge your preconcepts, right?
Absolutely. Get out your comfort zone.
Yeah, and I think there's an element of we constantly evolve. So if it is around the relevance and staying relevant, but there has to be a level of awareness there. Putting yourself in the rooms, and if there is something else around the right room, well, you've got to you have to stay relevant through awareness. Yeah. I couldn't think of another opportunity where, from a senior point of view, a senior leadership point of view, where you would to make the decision to go and put yourself in these environments for 3 days for this leadership retreat, especially with T2, and then heighten your level of awareness of something that you thought, oh, well, I've not even really reflected for a number of years. Yeah. Stay relevant through your awareness. And if there was a third thing, Scott, what do you think that'd be?
So, I mean, we speak to somebody called Spencer. He's one of our lead consultants here at T2, and he's got a saying, and he always says, if you think you're the smartest person in the room, you're in the wrong room. And I couldn't agree more with that statement for the large part, and definitely now. So the idea for me is, if you do think you're the smartest person in the room, then you are definitely in the wrong room. But what we will provide at our retreat is the right room with the right people in there to challenge you, to take you to that next step. So, get out of that comfort zone. Have a look at what your next step is. If we're serious about our career, we're serious about our development, and we're serious about making a dent in 2025 and 2026 and what that next layer looks like for you within your career path or your organization, then it's maybe time you started asking the question, how can I not be going to an event like this? So for the listeners out there who have heard us ramble and got heated and passionate about it, and it's not our usual structure, I will apologise. But it's definitely something I felt we needed to discuss. And because we have got these opportunities arise, and it was just one of them scenarios where I needed to say it. So get in the room and just get it out there, because I'm not sure people really take on the full value of what these things can offer, because they're using the excuse of time, and it's not about the excuse of time, it's the use of time effectively that will help them. So James, firstly, from me, thank you for putting up with my high body language and hand gestures and expressions from face. So I do get that, but thank you very much for allowing me to vent this.
Obviously, Scott, it is good to get you at your best, flying all barrels, all cylinders, whatever you want to call it. So it's great to get back in the podcasting room with you, Scott.
Yeah, brilliant. So guys, if you have any questions about upcoming events with T2, our leadership retreat that's not far from us now, get on our socials, ask some questions. Anybody who's visited one of our retreats in the past and can sort of endorse what I'm saying and has something to sort of add to it, please put it in the comments so people can see what they would get from it, what value they would take away from it, and why it's worth them spending their time. That would be amazing. So on that, thank you very much for listening to us, and I look forward to speaking to you all again very soon.
Scott, it has been a pleasure, and if there's anything for anybody that's listening, please reach out to T2 and follow us on socials, and we'll speak to you soon on the next T2 People Performance podcast.
Thank you very much, guys.